Welcome back to the C-Suite Cyber Podcast. The C-Suite Cyber Podcast enables C-Suite executives to make security-informed decisions.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Let's go ahead this time, instead of last time in the middle of the show, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves to you first, sir.
I'm AJ. I was in the Air Force working as a cyber warfare operator, basically keeping hackers out of the Air Force network, threat hunter by trade. Went back to the light side. Now I do threat detection and testing. All right, Mike, you're up.
Yeah, I didn't do anything cool in the military. Hi, my name is Mike. I hack stuff and build stuff. Yeah, so I started out on the blue side as well, working in the SOC, and kind of worked my way through a few roles, doing some technical forensics, malware analysis, and penetration testing, and now do pen testing, purple teaming type stuff. I just like solving complex problems because they're fun.
Yeah, gotta have someone solve them.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do the ad, and then we'll roll into our show. Actually, what is our show about? And then we'll talk about the ad. What are we talking about?
Today's show, or tonight's show rather, is actually going to be about hiring people, which I think we could all learn a thing or two from.
Stay tuned. All right, this show is brought to you by Tandem Cyber Solutions, your go-to penetration testing company for organizations. Yeah, on the hat. For organizations who take security seriously. One of the amazing programs that they have there, one of their service offerings, is the Hacker-Powered Security Program. What that means is you get a really comprehensive penetration test done every year, and you have a penetration tester, aka ethical hacker, on standby, ready to answer questions and help you with your projects to make sure you stay secure all year round. If you would like to talk with Tandem more about your project and how they can help you out, check them out at tandemcybersolutions.com/C-Suite-Cyber. And yeah, they'll be able to help you out.
Sweet.
All right. Yeah. Where do you want to go today? It looks like we have a couple of items. You want to start with nightmares, good hires, case studies? Spoiler alert.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with nightmares, kind of do the bad, and then we'll, remediate it later with some good stories, hopefully.
Yeah, so kind of a backstory to this one. So yeah, this podcast is all about helping executives make good decisions. Hiring is obviously probably one of the biggest decisions an executive can make for his team, especially if you're on the smaller side, right? You're at the beginning of your maturing process. You have, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 to 15 people. Every one of those hires has a chance to be super impactful because the team's so small. So if you make a mistake there, bring on the wrong people, you're asking for trouble when you're really holding back your cybersecurity program. So that's why we want to talk about it. We've been in the industry for quite some time. We've seen some bad hires. We've seen some good hires, and we've seen everything in the middle, I'd say, just about.
Yep. I think I'm in the middle, probably. Not too bad, not too great.
Upper, man.
Yeah. You gotta...
I'll vouch for you.
Gotta set expectations low, especially
you help solve my problems most of the time.
Yeah. Well, set expectations low, especially in today's environment with stacked ranking and other stuff at big orgs, and, helps you out in the long term.
Yeah. Well, they say that in sales. You want to set expectations kind of low and then exceed expectations, make them easier to exceed.
Yep. What other examples do you have of a nightmare?
I have quite a few stories of bad hires, actually. I know. So I've been on the hiring panel for several companies, actually bringing people on. These have never been one of my hires, by the way. I just want to put that out there. I called it. One of them is kind of funny, and it'll open up discussion. And I know if this goes in on a short, there'll probably be people talking crap about it, but whatever. I'll talk about it anyway. So we were interviewing this person, and this was for a SOC role, a SOC analyst role, a junior role. And the person had, just a background about the person, they had a master's degree. They looked really good on paper, probably like a lot of the people that are going to be in these stories. They look great on paper. Master's degree, internships, classes focused on the stuff we would be doing in the SOC. And we get into the interview and we start asking basic questions. Back then we used to ask things like, hey, give us a handful of common ports and services. Everyone should know at least a few. So it's kind of a quick check. You know basic Sec Plus stuff, very basic stuff. And immediately you start hearing some typing. Well, it sounds like typing because we're on the speakerphone and we're like muting, like, pretty sure they're Googling questions. Like, no, there's no way. There's no way. Because it's such a basic question. It's usually like a really quick win. Get people pumped up, get people, get a little bit of confidence, right? You don't ever want to give people a no recommendation just because they got nervous, right? You want to kind of do your best as an interviewer to put people at ease. So you want to give them some quick wins. But just out the gate, we're like, what the heck? Then we start digging in more and more questions. And I start kind of, just because I'm curious, edging towards things that would be Googleable, but maybe a little bit hard. And start asking them, like, and there'd be a pause and you just hear like filler words coming out. Just, let me think about that. They're like, I am so sure this person has been Googling everything in this interview. And so I'm obviously a no recommendation, not to mention the answers weren't that deep. But the powers that be just really liked the resume, thought this person just looked absolutely amazing, and they decided to extend an offer anyways. And lo and behold, can never prove that they were Googling stuff, but they were just horrible. They were one of the toughest people. They're the first person I've ever worked with a master's degree. Didn't really set the bar high. And I have to say, I haven't worked with a lot of people with master's degrees that have been that great. Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, they were horrible. It was very hard to teach, weren't coachable. They took forever. So like they would take 2 hours on like a basic brute force authentication alert, like stupid, simple stuff to investigate that were like benign. You know how bad the false positive rate is in most SOCs. And this was a
Right.
pretty whatever SOC. But yeah, so like that's the story. Like I had a bad gut instinct. Obviously, you want to give people a fair shot with other questions and stuff. But that was my thing. Was like people are going to push back and say, "Oh, well, you're not really want to test for knowledge anyways, right? Because you should be able to Google everything in your job. We all just Google. Yeah, we are extremely well paid Googlers, but we all have everyone who's decent anyways has a good basic understanding of stuff, and they know what questions to ask that are going to help to get to a conclusion. Not I have to Google everything for my job. Like if you have to Google everything for your job, it's going to take you forever to do anything.
Right.
Yeah, but that's my story. We're going to get pushed back on. You're welcome.
I think it's interesting. I recently saw a video where this person, and it could have been fake, obviously, but this person was doing an interview. They had their phone resting on their laptop screen with ChatGPT or some other LLM open that has voice to text. And so as they were asking the questions, it was interpreting the question and giving the response. And then the person would just read the response.
What?
You look confused.
Yeah, I'm very confused.
So on certain, like ChatGPT, I think there's a voice to text feature or whatever. So they would leave it on. So as the person interviewing, in this case you, would ask a question, what are common ports and protocols or whatever.
And so this is like while on a camera, not in person or
correct.
in person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remote. So they had it open with the phone in front of their laptop screen. So, if they look down, it's not that big of a difference. And then they would just be reading the response from the LLM. But that's something, it's a very timely thing, actually, because someone sent me a message earlier that was from an email that said, basically, do not take pictures of people, even if you think they're cheating, which I thought was interesting. I don't know why you would need to cheat certain interviews, I guess. I did have one interview, which is absolutely nuts. Probably the most difficult interview I've ever had for a security company, and it was a Rorschach test where basically they show you snippets from different tools or output of tools just to see what you know. And it would be like volatility, I almost said responder, volatility responder, maybe like a SIM, an IP config, an SSH or something, just like all kinds of variable command line tools, and it was just to
Sounds
see
like the CEH.
it was just to see what you actually knew. So it was very interesting, but
Well, that's not bad. I mean, that's actually
I don't think it was bad, but
kind of an interesting approach. I've never seen that one to an interview.
yeah, but it pissed me off because I was like, well, what is it? Like, I don't know what it is. What is it? And they're like, dude, we'll get to that later. Like, that's not important. I'm like, but I don't know. And it's annoying me that I don't know what this is. So, anyways, I have a nightmare. I was responsible for this hire in the sense that I was not the only person that agreed to hire this person. So, the first time I was leaving an organization, I needed to hire someone. So, some of my programs didn't fail. And this person was known to not be technical. That was fine. On paper, also a master's, if I recall correctly. Ran an Intel program at another large institution. You know, I don't have a master's or anything, and I'm doing fine. So,
You don't have a bachelor's either?
well, you didn't have to toss that out there, but
Yeah, I wouldn't hire you.
you would have.
Yeah, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Um,
Totally kidding.
but anyways,
So you can be dumb and successful. Sorry, so I'm just kidding.
listen, it's all about the team you build around you, right? I don't have to be smart. I just have to build my team with smart people.
Yeah, this is a great case study of why degrees don't matter right here. This guy, I promise. I'm not even like bullshitting here, like legitimately. Because you will see like people like, especially those classic big
Yeah.
companies are like, we have to have at least a bachelor's or a master's. They won't even look at you if you don't. It's insane. But yeah, sorry,
So,
keep interrupting. It was a great chance to put in a joke there. Just had to.
no, totally fine. To be fair, I say I do because I have two associates. So if you add 2
That's
years
not how that
and
works.
2 years, it's 4 years. So if they say, do you have a 4-year degree or equivalent? I do. And if you don't like
Okay.
it, get better verbiage in your job descriptions. Anyways, back to my nightmare. So
Do you really put
shut up.
like you have that with when that comes up? Because I will die. Like you just attach 2 associate degrees as a 4-year equivalent.
Yes, actually, no, I do. And I've only been questioned once. I'm never getting hired after this podcast comes out. I was questioned
He's got
once
experience. Don't worry about it.
by the same company that did the Rorschach test. And I was like, look, here's the deal. Here's the CCAFs. And they're like, yeah, cool. Okay. So it's two different, like one is cybersecurity. The other one is like IT or whatever. So, I mean,
Oh, really?
yeah. So if you
Huh.
put them together, it's basically a BS in cyber administration or whatever it's called nowadays.
BS and BS.
Yeah. We're never going to get through this. So
That's okay.
I hired
It's
this
okay,
person knowing that they were not technical. It was also a different dynamic to the team in that I mean that the team was previously like 4 guys. This was a woman. So just like completely shifts the dynamics, right? Like you go from trash talking each other pretty heavily to like, okay, we have a newcomer and we also need to pay attention to like the language that we're using and stuff like that. Be
Gotta
inclusive.
behave.
Yeah. So you don't want to like be the reason why someone doesn't want to go to work. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So we knew all this going in. And the plan was they would work. Basically, we would fill this role. We would then trade that person to the intelligence side and gain their head count when another candidate farther on would be available, right? That was the gist. Now, in practice, it did not work out too well. This person did have a master's, did have experience doing intelligence-based things, spent, I think, an hour and a half trying to log in with my credentials instead of her own. And another thing, didn't know like basic commands like host name, print out your host name. So people were trying to troubleshoot with her after I had already left the organization. And they're like, well, what's your host name? She's like, I don't know. I don't know how to find that out. So just very like, although it was known, it was, I guess, a very drastic difference to what expectations were that someone would have having been in a large organization. And I guess they just assumed that she would have troubleshot at some point, which is a interesting thing to not know, like IP config, hostname, et cetera, right? But yeah, that person left ahead of schedule and actually no longer works at the organization.
I'm not really surprised coming from the Intel community. Not to say they're not. You don't typically find really technical Intel people, although that's not technical per se, but it could be technical for some people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like we work with people who have been at three-letter agencies, and I mean, we've kind of talked about cyber intelligence in other videos, and basically how it's not useful for us because we do our own reading and investigating and then compiling and actually executing code. I think it's interesting that I've met like super good technical intelligence people, or at least technical enough, like could tell you exactly how a Russian threat actor does something. And then you have the other side where it's like, I can't even get you to fill out the spreadsheet correctly. And I've told you how to do it 7 times. Like, it seems like there's a big disparity in that field. And maybe that's just my very limited purview that I've had, but I think it's more common in Intel fields than maybe the overall security field.
Yeah, I mean, I've had pretty frustrating experiences, like you said, with Intel, and some of it's you've not. Some of it, I think, is I just haven't given the relationship long enough to be able to kind of figure out what we both need to be successful. I think that's some of it. You both have to be open to kind of changing the way you do things in order to build like that workflow that's going to work for everyone. And it could just be both parties are too busy to figure that out. So we're just like, I'll just do it myself. And then they ignore. But I will say to give a +1 to Intel, my favorite Intel person ever. Sorry, any other future Intel people I meet, you will never be better than this Intel person. I won't say her name because she doesn't like to have her name out there sometimes. But she changed the way I present information to non-technical people. Watching her work. So I did a big investigation. My piece was a technical investigation. Her piece was synthesizing all the intel to feed us as we're doing the investigation and to present timelines and information above, right? So there's a huge filter between my information and then what, the higher level people need to know. They don't need to know every piece of the narrative. We do because we need that to be able to figure out where we need to pivot the investigation and what gaps are left to be filled. But higher up, they don't give a shit. Hey, how screwed are we? That's what they want to know.
Right.
But she did such a phenomenal job at distilling information down to what is exactly necessary to tell the story. It was incredible. Like, I had pages and pages and pages and pages of activities, and she put it onto a single page, and it was clear, concise. I had nothing bad to say about it. Usually as a technical person, you're like, but you missed this and you missed this. But it was so well done. It was like, yeah, you summarized it well. No feedback. And because of that, now I think a lot about how I present information to non-technical people now, because do I need this in there? Is this going to add or detract from the story? Is it going to confuse them? Because that's a lot of it too. Is this going to confuse a non-technical person? Because you've probably seen it quite a bit. Like, you say something and it derails the entire conversation because it just flipped them to freak out, and they just can't get away from that thing. But it's really not that important to us. But to them, it just triggers something, and they just won't let go. They're like a dog. They just bit onto it and won't let go. But there's the one for Intel. Like, had completely changed the way I think about conveying information to people, technical information and non-technical people.
Do you think she was just using like keywords like root cause, pivot, like stuff like that to build out the executive summary?
No, it wasn't even an executive. Well, there was an executive summary, but there was a timeline as well of major activities. So not only did she summarize it well in an executive summary that was very concise, but the timeline, she just took so much crap away, distilled it down to very concise of the key moments in the threat actor's activity. It was just insane. I was like, how? And it's like, I know this is possible now. I just need to be better. I need to stop sucking here and do this properly.
Yeah. I liked her when I met her. Assuming it's the same person.
Yep. Yep. That person.
Very smart.
Yes.
Well, I do have another nightmare story, this time originating from the military. Oh,
Dum
surprise.
dum.
So I used to work on many different teams. One of those teams was HBSS, or host-based security system, whatever. Basically, there was a contractor. I wish I knew his name because I would drop it. But there was a contractor who actively prevented us from automating our tasks. So to set the field here, the Air Force at the time, which I don't know if it still is, was the single largest network, right? Because it was the largest network in the world. So you're getting millions of events, right? Obviously, some of those are lows. You have a little bit more mediums, maybe a highs, and then on a bad day, probably like criticals, right? If something is like actually going on, there's a red team engagement or something. So one thing that we tried to do was very simple. Just PowerShell, grab the stuff so we're not working out of a CSV, and then just display it in, I forget what the actual term is, but in PowerShell, there's a display or a format that you can use where it's kind of like a GUI,
Print.
right?
No kidding.
What'd you say?
Print.
It's not print. Shut up.
Invoke display stuff.
Yeah, it's not Python. But no, like he wouldn't even let us go through that to try to like group by host names or anything to do some sort of correlation. So, and then we would try something else. I don't know what all we tried, but this went on for several months, and it was always, no, we got to do it this way because I said, and I'm the lead, and I'm a contractor. So, or like, it might have been like a CS12 or something. I don't know. But just like, I don't have to do anything because you can't fire me, but I'm going to prevent you from doing something so that you look better than me type of situation. And it was just absolutely ridiculous. I believe the person got fired after I left, which is great.
Yeah. There's a name and a special place for those people in hell. I think that's like one of the coolest things about working with people with a hacker mentality is everyone's on the same page in terms of how do we get rid of this crappy work no one wants to do so we can focus on the interesting stuff, because they have the same mentality as me where we just want to solve interesting problems. I don't want to keep solving the same problem over and over where I know the answer. Like, that's boring. That's repetitive. I don't want to do it. I hand that off to like an intern or something like that if I can't automate it. But people who actively get in the way, like that person, so just for what's the job safety, or what's the word?
Job security.
Job security. Boom. Security podcast. Job security. But like that's yeah, that's horrible. But people do that. They'll kind of stack the cards in their favor for whatever reason, like giving people bad reviews or making people look bad behind the scenes just to prop themselves up and kind of prop up their little fiefdom that they're building, which is absolutely insane to me. I guess that's kind of one of my downsides. I don't really play politics well or play them very much at all. I just want to do. And yeah, sometimes that gets you in trouble.
Yeah, you play more than I do.
I don't play that much.
Sorry for the cough if you hear it. I'm fighting some sinus infection.
He's got COVID again. Everyone put on your mask while you listen to this. No, I don't really play that much. Like sometimes it's like I'm filling out people to try to get a project pushed through, because you can't do anything without support in a lot of places. And so you have to build up that support. So you're like, all right, yeah, we have like 10 people that really need this thing I'm building. So allow me to spend time on it.
Is it a coincidence that the last like 3 or 4 people that tried to partner with you?
I see where you're going with this. No, I have nothing to do with that. Maybe I just set the bar way too high behind me, because I start lots of stuff and then I move on to other things, and then it just fizzles out after I leave. And it's very depressing for me, actually. It is actually very depressing for me. I've built, I don't know how many training programs, had to be 4 different ones now, and they've all fallen apart as soon as I leave, like, and focus on a new project. it is so disconcerting. Like, how? Why? And then, like, I was actually questioning myself. Am I building this the wrong way where it's so fragile that you take this one person out, it just crumbles? And so, I don't know. I haven't solved that problem yet. How do you build something that outlasts you? Have to figure that out.
Maybe you should just become an instructor instead of a hacker.
No, I'd be bored. I like teaching, but I don't want to do it all of my job. I'd like to do it maybe 10% and then 90% build stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I get it.
Although building training's kind of the same. But yeah, well, the problem I have with like training all the time is I'm constantly giving and I don't get back.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a bunch of people that I originally trained. Well, actually, in all the original training programs I've done, the last three organizations I've been at, they still reach out, hey, with questions or whatever. Hey, I got promoted or I'm doing this now. Like several of them are C-suite now, VPs, directors, CISOs. So it's cool. Like that's receiving doing it like, cool. You've been super successful. I could tell because you were really like motivated and good, picked up quickly. I'm not surprised. Awesome. I mean, you can almost tell early on, like day one, who's going to be successful and who's not, like long term. And you just get that feeling like, oh, they're like so tuned into this thing. They're so curious and they just go. But yeah, like I think it was, well, the first place I was at when I was a SOC, like a shift lead, I built a training program for all my people. Like once a week, we get together and train. You could tell, like it wasn't mandatory, but people who showed up were actually really good. They were curious, invested in their own success. The second place, I trained everyone before they even got into the SOC on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So they went through basically my boot camp. And you could see in that the people who were curious, who were digging in, who constantly just got better and better, they were the ones who became the leads, who became super technical, moved over to more specialized roles and stuff like that. But those were good hires. And you can tell in that class who was a bad hire pretty freaking quickly.
Yeah.
Like we had a guy, and one of those, he was a captain or something in the Army Reserves. He was such a douchebag. Yeah. Officers. Who would have thought?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But he was like, not like I was going to say, he questioned everything. How dare you? No, but like it was stupid stuff. Like he just couldn't agree with me on like these are fundamental truths in our world. And you're questioning these fundamental truths. Like, please question stuff, but this stuff is just, you're eating up time for no reason. Like, and everyone was like, what the heck is going on here? But he was so cocky. He would show up to class late. He would leave early. Like, oh, I'm going to lunch and never come back. They ended up firing him.
The hell?
I was like,
They should have.
yeah. But yeah, like I said, you can tell pretty quickly who's a good hire. Who's a bad hire. But yeah. I mean, it's cool. Like, I still have people that I used to work with a long time ago I taught. Like, I'll be out in the yard picking up stuff or doing yard work, and they call me, hey, can you walk me through this forensic technique, how to do an acquisition of an image and then work through it with whatever? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I'm sitting there doing yard work with the headphones in, talking them through forensic stuff. But I don't know. That's just how it is. They all know they have an open invitation. Call me whenever, because you did such a good job. Like, I'm cool to spend my time continuing to invest in you. It doesn't bother me whatsoever, even if I don't work with you anymore. I'm sure we'll meet sometime down the road.
I think it's important too. Like, while we're on the hiring aspect, when you're hiring managers or leaders, rather, hiring people that actually care about their people rather than themselves getting ahead or like taking advantage of the work that their direct reports are performing. I mean, there's been times, especially on our team, getting people interviews with other companies after they tell us that they want to leave, right? Or rotational program, people who have rotated off of our team. So the rotational program, you come in as a college graduate, a new college grad, and you do a year on one team, and then you rotate to your other team. Well, if you're the team who gets in the first year, you might not get a lot of work out of them. It takes a long time for them to get spun up on the actual like business culture, practices, etc. Sometimes how to log into their computer, as we heard before. Then they rotate, so you might not get an actual return although you have to invest basically a year of your time training and building them as a individual and a teammate. And then they'll still reach out to us. Like you and I have a good relationship with a few of the guys that we've trained before. So I think it's important, especially at the higher levels, when you're building your team, actually building people that you want to be around that will take care of the other people. Because like you mentioned at the beginning, this one decision, like if you hire, say, your director of security and they're just a piece of shit, like that could really kill your growth overall. So, these things have cascading effects. Obviously, the more people that roll up to that individual, they have more responsibility. You've got people's lives at stake in a sense, like with their livelihoods, and like they're relying on your business or organization to get compensated for their work and have a house or kids or whatever. We all have liabilities, as we call them. But
House and kids, liability. Stupid Toto and little Bobby. You're such a liability.
but they take money out of your pocket. That's why they're a liability. But the thing is, right?
They sometimes take a shit on your floor.
We're getting down to the good stuff today, guys.
Hey, we're super casual on this one. Lots of cuss words and sidebars. Solid.
Yeah, right.
The not so serious podcast.
We said we help you make good decisions. We didn't tell you it's going to be a serious episode.
Yeah, don't take family and life decisions from us. But cybersecurity tips, those are solid.
Yeah, what's your opinion on rotational programs? Because
I don't know. I think the idea is solid, but it's the same as internships. Like for Tandem, I would never have a pen tester as an intern.
sorry, I'm just showing my beer.
Like I would never hire an intern because they don't have enough information to do the job well, and it's basically a waste of time. Like when you look at introducing these early career people into your program, one, you have to have a training program to support them, right? Because they are going to eat up your time. And so if you don't have like a training ramp into their role where they can start being productive at some point, like you have to have a plan to make them productive. And I think with you and me, we got really creative in making sure ours became productive relatively early. So it could be maybe less technical tasks that would be very beneficial for the overall program we were running. And then we coach them in between on various things, on their technical skills until they get to a point where now they can lend their technical skills. But you have to have a plan. Otherwise, they're just going to eat away at your more experienced people in that period to where they can provide like actual, I was going to say talent. It's not the word, but a benefit till they're useful. There we go. Until they can be useful, it's going to be so long. And all they're doing is really eroding at your ability to make progress. Because one, you don't have a training program, you don't have a plan, and you're not tasking or leading them very well. So they're a detriment. So that's why I say I would never have them as a pen tester. There's nothing in there I would only hire experienced people because of that. I don't have a big enough roadmap. I don't have a great way to make use of them early on as a pen tester in their career. Maybe turn them into a project manager potentially, and they can sit on some stuff perhaps. They can't even be good QAs because they don't know enough to be able to correct reports or help with that. Like they would just be, does your grammar sound good? But they wouldn't be able to say, this doesn't have a good flow. You're missing something in your attack chain, whatever. They'd be piss poor QA people. So really PMs, that's all you get out of them. Maybe. So perhaps, but a lot of people that junior suck at managing projects unless they had an earlier career where they had a lot of that type of stuff going on where they were a leader somewhere else, like maybe in the military or something. But yeah, it's okay if you have a plan. You just have to have the things for them to do and a plan to grow them into a role where they can be even more useful. But don't expect to hire these people and they're going to be like hitting home runs early on. You can with a unicorn. We've had some cases where there have been early career people and they're just killing it. Cool. But that's not going to happen every time. That's going to be a very rare thing. And I think even with experienced hires, it's difficult to hit a home run with a hire. And it comes down to the hiring process you go through. It's very hard to get a feel for how good someone is long term. Sure, maybe they can memorize questions and answer them. But the biggest thing that we encounter, right, in ours is problem solving. Can you solve a hard problem by just Googling shit and figuring and like hitting your head against it until you get an answer? That's a really rare skill to find.
It's difficult to make it worth the investment, right? Like at certain levels, rotational programs pay six figures, right? And the amount of work that you're getting out of some of those people is probably like, gosh, what's the word I was going to say? Yes,
Non-existent.
yeah. So
Wishful thinking.
it's like it doesn't make sense, in my opinion, for the rotational programs to pay so much from a financial perspective. Like it makes sense if you're going into the rotational program as a individual for sure. So you're going to get paid a ton of money. You might learn a few things here, might learn a few things there. But from the organization standpoint, the work and the quality that you're getting, because a lot of times we have to correct that work or even redo it, right? Like you and I have to go and we're like, okay, you had this for a week and you still did this wrong. So now I have to spend my time to go fix this because this has to be done. And then if it's not, like that impacts other projects. So it's interesting. I understand it. Like I think it's good for building a pipeline, but I don't know that it's necessarily the right way to get people into the organization, I guess. Especially when you start them at such a large salary and then the differences between the levels become smaller and smaller. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw AJ a bone here. He's not saying he's almighty and he doesn't like redoing people's work because he enjoys that very much. But when you this goes back to like strategically thinking what to give them. So for me, when I give them stuff, I expect it to take a long time, and I expect to have to go and make them revise their final product over and over. So I'll go in, I'm like, all right, let's see what you have so far, and give them some nudges. All right, go try it again. And then, a few days later, go back. All right, here's some more corrections. Go try again. But you have to anticipate that that's happening, and you can't expect like, hey, 3 days, do this thing, and then come back and be mad at them that they got it wrong on the first try. They don't know shit. So I just wanted to throw that bone out there. Like, yeah, it sucks, but we understand it's going to be that way, and we plan whenever we do stuff. You can probably hear my dog in the background panting or whatever, but you just have to anticipate these things. You have to anticipate, or you're going to be really upset at what you got, what you paid for, because you are purchasing these people essentially. You're spending your budget on these new people. So you better know what you're getting. And I think another topic we can go into in terms of hiring is looking at that long-term horizon. Part of the issue that a lot of organizations have is turnover, right? By the time you get these people up to speed and they're actually benefiting the organization quite a bit, maybe they're ready to turn around and leave. Why? Maybe the benefits suck. Maybe you're not paying enough. To go back to counter your argument a little bit, you're not paying them enough. So as soon as you do invest all that time, they're out of there. They're gone. I know I've had to do that at a couple of places. The salary was, it was all right, but I took a 30 or 40% jump by leaving, and I got additional duties, additional stuff. I could continue building my experience and expertise by making that jump because they didn't plan ahead, plan on a way to retain people. So whether that's training, salary, increased duties, whatever it is, you got to have a plan to retain your talent, keep them around, keep them invested, keep them interested in whatever you're doing with your program. What are your thoughts on like looking at that in totality?
Yeah, I agree. I think culture is also a big one there,
Yeah, I forgot
especially
about
with
that.
younger generations
Gen Z.
and also non-military people. I think we have a very particular way of speaking, and
We as in military,
yeah, in general, more so you and I specifically.
with the way we talk to people sometimes, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and
Gen Z has their own unique vocabulary too.
yeah, you
Just
got to
throwing that
raise
out.
up the new hires. You know what I'm saying? Res means
Don't go
charisma
to HR.
for some of you guys, by the way.
What does it mean?
Charisma. It's
I
very
didn't know it was short for
it's a
something.
very dumb shorthand. But anyways, pay.
More, you know.
I think also like when you go in and you're starting out already so high, right? Like a lot of these, a lot of these people's families don't even make that much money, depending on where you're at. So when you're fresh out of college and like, yeah, I make this much, you can also get into a negative mindset where you're like, well, now I have to make more, or I have to um, jump ship in order to like play the game of how much money can I get, rather than finding something that you enjoy, that you actually care about, and putting forth the effort there to actually grow that. So I think there's a few things in addition to what you listed. I've only worked at two places outside of the military, so it's been interesting. Yeah, don't know what else to say about that, so I don't get fired.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would add to that too. This is where leadership comes in handy. So some of the things you learn, not to say I know everything about leadership. I stay technical for a reason, for the most part. But part of being a good leader is understanding what your people are looking to get out of something, right? You got to know what their motivators are. Some people, it's not money. Some people, hey, I'm looking for more and more knowledge. And so whenever you're working with your more junior people or just your employees in general, have an understanding of that and try to build their role so that you're fulfilling as many of their motivators as possible. So it could be, yeah, I like going out and meeting people or presenting at conferences or sharing knowledge. Figure out how you can support that. Hey, they're trying to hit a certain salary or whatever. Some people are motivated by money. I used to be hard on if someone said, why do you want to be in cybersecurity? I want to make money. I used to be like, screw this person. Eat immediately, bad taste in my mouth. Now it's like, I get it. I get it. I get it. And we all have different motivators. Some people, you don't have to love the work to be motivated. If you are getting paid and that's your motivator, great. You can still churn out high quality work because your motivator is, if I produce a lot, if I produce really well, I equate that to more money. So that's fine. Versus people who I equate solving problems to just having fun. They may produce the same amount of work, the same quality of work. It's just a different motivator. And it's up to you as a leader to understand what those pieces are and talk to it and lead and support them in their growth with whatever motivator. Almost like the love languages in a relationship, if you've ever heard of those. You got to speak their language. If it's dollars, speak dollars. If it's skills, send them the training, send them the conferences, whatever it is. If it's attaboys, make sure to say, hey, great job. Thank you for sending this to me. Hey, talk them up whenever you're in front of other people, whatever it is. Leadership 101. That's your BLC Army.
You were talking about leadership and stuff, and I think one thing that is good for pretty much any level, right, is to figure out the people that you interact with, how do they like to be presented information. So in my case,
Oh, that's a good one
I'm
too.
very
Yeah.
direct. Like if I am messing up, I need to know that I'm messing up, or else I'm just going to keep operating the way I do.
Bad memes at AJ to encourage him not to do whatever he's done.
Don't do that. My motivation, for the most part, is financial, I would say, at least tied to finances. Before you were mentioning training people before they actually sat in the SOC, I am a big fan of needing to certify before you like sit.
That's an Air Force thing, though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
I hear the Navy does something similar.
They probably do. So for context, before you could sit mission, so the Air Force classifies cyber weapons as like weapons, right? You have to be certified to sit mission on that weapon set. So the FCERT, they had a weapon, quote unquote, that I eventually went to and was on that team, which is where we actually like went and killed anything that got into the Air Force, not like pew pew, but like digitally. And in order to sit even the basic mission, or what you would know more as like a traditional SOC, so looking at networking events, I mentioned HBSS earlier, or endpoint, host-based events. And then there was another one that was like, oh, like vulnerability management. They also had to certify before they could sit and actually like perform their jobs. I think it helps kind of weed out the bad people and show like who actually cares and who doesn't. And not to say that like if you struggle because you're coming from a completely different career field, say you are a product manager, or maybe you're like Daddy Smalls and you're a law enforcement officer, right? Like you have different backgrounds. It's more of, are you able to be coached? Are you able to learn and, like you said before, struggle and then overcome those obstacles that are actually in your way, versus do you just give up, or you just kind of don't care and you're like, hey, I'm going to just let this happen. I don't really know how they got into the system. They got a domain admin. They're kind of screwed. I don't know. It's fine. But I like that. I think it helps. We've also seen more than a handful of analysts who are poor operators, which is very upsetting. Traditionally, people start out in the SOC, and you might move to incident response, forensics, threat hunting, whatever. That's not always the case, but I think when you do it that way, it makes more sense. You build like from your foundational knowledge into the specialty programs. But I like requiring certification to actually sit. I'm curious. I haven't seen many places that actually do that. Have you seen any when you were a pen tester that require like, can you do a pen test before we actually like hire you, kind of thing?
Oh yeah, yeah. My first pen test job, they were pretty serious about people. That was probably one of the toughest interviews I've had. Honestly, so I went in as an entry level pen tester, and they had several interviews. So talking through technical stuff, I sat with one of the directors. We had coffee, and I felt like he scratched every surface of my brain to understand what I knew, like the depth of my knowledge. It was the most comprehensive interview I've ever been in. Like my brain freaking hurt. And it helped because he, even as a director, was still doing pen tests. He was still active. I mean, I want to say all the way up to our VP at that organization, we're still doing pen tests too. So we were all pretty technical people. And that was very difficult, but that wasn't the most difficult one. I would say too, what was great about that, and I try to mimic that style of conversation. Thank you. Maybe he knows who he is if he ever listens to this, but I try to mimic that in the fact where it's conversational. He would be like, hey, have you heard of this thing? And I'd be like, well, no. At the time, I think it was domain fronting. Yeah, it was domain fronting. And I hadn't really heard of it at that time. And I just started becoming a thing. And he was like, just talking me through it, and would ask me along the way, have you heard of this piece? Have you heard of this piece? So I could still answer with the stuff I did know about how it worked. But it was conversation in that he was coaching me already. Like I haven't even been hired, but he's already coaching me. And it's very telling about the type of leadership. So I try to take that approach when I do interviews and when I work with people too. It's not, I'm just telling you this. I want to continue to help you build on your knowledge by just really focusing on the things you don't understand. Moving along that journey, one of the interview portions of that was a coding challenge, which is maybe not unfamiliar to those who've done programming and are developers, but to a cyber technical person is like, what? You want me to code live? Yeah. So everyone, I think there was 4 or 5 people on the interview panel, watched me live program a solution to this question. I was like, what? And what was worse for me in that experience was I had a sinus infection that was like full blown, like nosebleeds, my head was stopped up. And I thought I answered the question, but I thought I did horrible just because I couldn't think. I felt like shit.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously I passed, I got the job, but it was insane. So they're like already feeling like they have hit me every way and probably have a really good idea of the type of person I am by this point because of I think there were maybe 4 interviews total. But they did such a thorough job. And I want to say no one was a horrible hire there. Some of them were better than others. Like there's gradients, but they had a lot of stellar, like hot pen testers that worked there. Like top. There's still churning out amazing, amazing work to this day. But it just speaks to the quality level that they were bringing on. Like, it was rock stars, a team of rock stars. But they did such a great job of developing talent. It was unbelievable. And I've tried to kind of recreate that in a lot of places I've been. Just that mentality of, let's coach them up. Let's have various training sessions. Let's build a culture of sharing, of knowledge, of helping each other out. But speaking back to like where we're developing talent, yeah, they had a talent development pipeline in place. It was solid. It was amazing. I've never seen another one even come freaking close to what they were doing there. And it was all because of the leadership. I've heard it's changed now. And it's because all those leaders, all the directors have since left. But that was one. If I had to have a regret on my resume, that's my regret, that I left when I did. I left too early. I mean, I went to a job that was paying quite a bit more, but I would have taken less to stay there longer.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, because it set me up to where I am now. Just the culture, how they developed me. Like, yeah, incredible.
Do you think that the quality was better at that first company compared to your second company?
Well, that was my third company. Yeah, that was you're talking about where my first pen test company?
Yeah.
You're asking if the quality of talent was better there?
Not talent, quality of work.
Like me doing work?
No, just in general, like the clients that that company produced reports for versus the other company that was able to pay more money. Were they producing better quality of work?
So I left that to not be a pen tester anymore. But I will say their quality of work at the time was insane. And the processes that they developed, the workflows, made it really hard to do bad output. And the leader was so invested in your success too. They would pop in. You gotta roam free after a while. You had to do a bunch of pen tests with a more senior person. Your reports always had to have multiple peer reviews, but the culture was done in such a way that it was okay for you to ask for help. You get stuck, you're like, hey, I'm gonna try some things because I want to learn, but I also know who specializes in this thing, if it's AV bypass or databases or whatever. And you can say, hey, do you mind showing me a few things? Show me how you would work this problem. And they'd hop on and help you get over that roadblock, teach you a few things. And then maybe you will share that in the next team call where, hey, I got to work with so-and-so. He showed me this thing. And this is how I got it to work. Here you go. And I put it up on our internal wiki. But it was 360. You teach me something, I'm going to teach everyone else. Or I build something to get around this problem. I'm sharing it with everyone else. But it was always one to many everywhere. And everyone was always sharing something. It was insane. I literally have never been anywhere like that ever again. Yeah, insane. That's why I said I would have stayed there. I should have, but it's all good. I learned a lot. I developed in other ways, but it took me a while because it was kind of depressing going from Mount Everest to the summit of the world, down into the not so summit of the world, maybe the Marianas Trench, and then climbing my way out of it mentally. And then I started producing, but the culture was so different. It was a shock. No one was working that hard. No one really gave a shit.
Is that?
And then I kind of started doing my own thing, and they let me just build stuff and make a difference. And then I was like, then I started learning again.
I think you answered my question. Cool.
What's that?
I was going to ask if that was when you were a contractor.
Yep. I was a contractor. Everyone will tell you it was depressing.
See,
I was going to ask you on your but you were saying, what happened if someone failed qualification for their weapon system?
Yeah, so you could retest, and if you failed twice, you did not sit. So, for example, DCC, which was the team that I was on later on, defensive counter cyber, so first you had to be like pretty much picked to go through the school for that. Not school, it was like in-house, but we had a lab environment. And if you sit to certify and you fail, you get one retest. If they think like maybe you're just bad at, actually going through, you had jitters or whatever. Because it is hands-on, you basically do an investigation, need to eradicate the threat, and then confirm that it's eradicated, that they can't get back in, kind of thing. So there was one guy who failed. He also looked up something that we told him not to look up on government computers. And because of that, he was barred from being on the team because we had basically domain admin, like, to the entire Air Force, right? So if we can't trust you to do something as simple as like listen when we tell you not to look at something, then obviously we can't trust you with a weapon system that could basically do whatever you wanted within the Air Force network.
Was it Area 51?
Can neither confirm nor deny.
We almost had a bunch of answers to the unknown people. Yeah, that's crazy. I guess to circle back, yeah, I do like the idea of some sort of qualification program. Like, I like the idea of in talent development having a roadmap, like a plan for your people.
Sure.
Like, all right, we have these tiers in the SOC, we have tiers in these other teams. So people have like a goal to strive for, but we also have the training and all the pieces to support that pathway too. So you always know where you're going and what it means to accomplish each step. Each step. Why am I in it? Each step. There we go. Like whether that's salary and expanded leadership duties or something, whatever it is, but it's good to know. I've been at so many places where it's completely unknown. Like, how do I get to the next step? What is the next step? You just don't know. And that becomes a big distractor. And it takes away from the people to be able to do good work. Just because they're curious about solving problems doesn't mean they don't want to grow in their career.
Mm-hmm.
So having those conversations, how do I get to the next step, boss, is good to have, and supporting that growth. Hey, I can't guarantee you'll get promoted, right, if there's a huge pool of people, but this is what they're looking for. Here's a plan for us to get you where you are competitive, right? That's the idea for a lot of these. How do I become competitive for a higher level role? Because we all, at the end of the day, we do want to make more money, whether that's the primary driver or not, because that makes a big difference in our families, our quality of life. It does make a difference. I remember in my business, I had to take an HR course, and they do say, like, up to a certain point, more money doesn't help. That's true, but more money is never going to be turned down. I promise. Like, if you're doing the same work and I said, hey, AJ, I'm ready to give you more money. I'm like, nah, I'm good, bruh. Like, it's never going to happen.
I think assuming everything else stays the same, that's correct. But if it was, hey, you're no longer remote, or you now have a different quality of life, like you're working 80-hour weeks compared to 40 or something, like there's always
everything's the same.
Yeah. Then no, I'll take it for sure. 100%.
Yeah, but I think the unknowns cause a lot of stress. And I think that is a problem with a lot of immature organizations, is they don't know what the plan is for their team. They don't know.
I think there's a caveat to that, right? With smaller organizations in general, they might not have enough input or maybe enough people in order to progress you to that next level. So you might actually need to look at, I'm going to say this, like I have any experience with this, but like basically getting some equity, right? So like if it's a smaller 10-person company, and you're like, hey, I want to get to this level. I understand we don't have enough work for this to happen. But if I work at this level, could I get like 1% equity or whatever is negotiated, right? Like I've seen that happening. It probably wouldn't be one, but you get what I'm saying.
That's a lot. Yeah,
I gotcha. I mean, I think it depends, especially like if you're dealing with sales reps, for example. That's a different scenario because the more they sell, the more income the organization has, the more they can then pay that individual. But if you're manufacturing or you're limited due to the number of clients that you have, there's only so much growth that can occur, right? So obviously people are going to hit these ceilings, and then like you mentioned, maybe they need another another avenue to basically get what they're looking for out of.
I mean, sometimes like being competitive in the job market for that role might not have anything to do with salary. It could be a mix of things. It could be the flexibility. It could be that you can work remote. So you may be able to afford to pay lower salaries if those other things are in place. But you just have to consider what you're trying to accomplish. And you may end up having turnover, but if you can keep somebody, I think the statistics used to be like people would only stay one to 1.5 years in a cybersecurity role, which is incredible. Very different than most places. But if you could plan to keep them there for 3 years per se, right? You've already doubled what everyone else is doing. That's already a good deal. And if they need to leave because they're at that point, they got the experience or whatever, no worries. If you're building out that internal knowledge, you're having them fill out their workflows or whatever they do, it's not going to be as bad when you replace them because they've already documented everything. Maybe you have a nice little crossover, whatever it is, but turnover is going to happen. You're never going to prevent it, but you can decrease how often it happens with proper planning, I think.
Or you can increase how often it happens. Yay, stacked rankings. Go Amazon.
AJ loves stack rankings.
It's literally worse than the military.
I think theoretically it's a good idea, but I don't know how well it plays out. Because think about it, right? You never have 100% of your people, well, maybe, not in big organizations though, 100% of people that are good, are fantastic, like rock stars. And so you would be eliminating the below average in hopes of landing another rock star. It's like kind of like a little gamble.
The issue, yeah, go ahead.
Politics come into play, is what I was going to say. Politics come into play, personality clashing comes into play, or whatever. And it's not a perfect, it's almost like communism, right? Communism sounds fantastic. This shit never works out.
Yeah. Well, and then you've also got like obviously a smaller team. So
yeah, forced percentages is tough at the micro level.
Yeah. I think larger it makes sense, but that's not how it's played out in a few places.
Well, then it kind of ends up being too where like government budgets. We're going to talk politics. No, it's not politics. But like government budgets, for those of you who don't know, you get a certain budget in the government, and if you don't spend that budget, guess what happens? Your budget gets subtracted. Nobody wants to lose budget. They always want to maintain budget. And so you hear all these stories like I've heard from people in the Navy where they just chunk stuff off the ship so they can reorder more in the next year so that they can show that their budget's at least the same. And I know there's similar stories in the Army as well. But it's the same thing, right? Like you're forcing them to maintain something that they really don't want to. So they're going to cut corners and do stuff when you really need to take a holistic view of that organization to decide where the cuts should be. Because some teams aren't going to be the same high standard team, and some teams are going to be really good. And now you're like cutting all rock stars because you have like a 4-person team. All of them were fantastic hires, and now you got to cut one of the 4 or whatever. Like that sucks. But if you look at the overall organization, like, well, this team is loaded with sandbags in intel. But no, I'm kidding. But yeah, but then the question is, this is getting very philosophical. Well, how do you look at that how do you look at that and be fair? How can you take a look at the entire organization and get feedback from all the teams without actually being on all the teams and be able to give a fair decision about who should get cut? Because everyone's lying. Everyone's giving you like the best version of all their people, making up shit too while they're at it.
Yeah. I don't think everyone lies. I think
some people lie more than others.
That I would say is true. But also,
a lot more.
I'm not too sure we should be taking budget advice from the military who lost $1 trillion for the Navy tossing devices off of ships. Like that's why they take 15 minutes to boot up. Clearly, the budget has not worked in their favor.
Here's the moral of the story, I think, to summarize this amazing journey. Bad leaders mean bad teams. So make sure you're hiring the right leaders so that you have good quality people on your teams and that you're not rushing the hiring decision either. Because some people just settle. It's like settling for a girlfriend. You don't want to settle. If you're looking to marry someone, you want to pick a winner.
Damn, you should put that on a pillow.
Do what?
You should put that on a pillow.
I didn't know what the hell you said. I was like, wait, what? Yeah. Don't settle their leaders.
Yeah, actually, that brings up a story. When I was running the team, so I guess let me back up. In certain organizations, recruiters like work for people who run the team, which was the case in this scenario. My recruiter told me I was being too selective with people I would interview. And I said, yeah, that's the point. We're a highly technical team. I need someone who actually knows what the hell they're talking about. Needless to say, we got a different recruiter. Did not work out for him. Like, how are you going to tell me?
Suck.
Yeah, how are you going to be like, oh, just accept anyone who walks through the door? Like, no.
Except Joe. Joe doesn't suck. You know who you are, Joe Hudson. I'll call you out. You're amazing. It's my boy. That's the only reason I went to one of the conferences recently. But yeah, recruiters are just like everyone else at every other position. You really have to choose the right fit. Some of them, like a good bit of them, suck. Major stuff. Like they're horrific. And you're just throwing people at you, wasting your time interviewing. It's like, come on. But that also goes where like some people try to be cheap. Like, oh, I just want to post it myself, or I want to pay for the cheapest recruiter. You're going to get what you're going to pay for. If you're looking to build a quality team, invest in a quality team. If you're looking to build out a SOC, and I'll talk to this because I've had a lot more experience building out a SOC team, plan to hire some more experienced people. I think a lot of SOCs make the mistake of you hire 5 to 6 junior, very entry-level people for every one experienced person, and you're wondering why your SOC sucks. That's the problem. You have way too many junior people. You don't have a good training program. Everyone's overworked because they're not good at automating stuff. Their support isn't well developed. What do you think's going to happen? You're building a train wreck. Invest. Pour money into good people. Good people usually pay dividends in themselves if you take the time.
I'm curious what your stance on using AI, going back to SOCs.
You a MFer, man.
So, yeah,
He probably heard me say something about this the other day, and he was like, I'm gonna make him say it on the podcast now. Ha.
No, I mean, AI is a new buzzword. It is everywhere. It is annoying, but we have seen use cases that, like, where it's valuable, right? Like, there is a value add. We've seen plenty of times where some lower tier analysis is not so great. There is a fee there. That's why companies are spinning up in order to resolve this issue. So obviously there's some demand, and they're attempting to meet this need. So what is your opinion going to the hire and kind of along with build versus buy as well, right? Like, should I build people through a training initiative, or should I buy this artificial intelligence solution, which costs significantly less than a full-time salary?
I had this conversation a while back in the last SOC I was in, and we're adamant we can replace, I don't remember how many people were in there. There were a lot, with like a handful of intermediate and senior analysts for less money and have better quality work. It's very true. Very true. But it also comes back to bad hiring practice. A lot of they did not do a really good job hiring people, and it was just the way it was set up. It was a contracting role. It was the way it was set up. They couldn't hire, certain people couldn't make the decisions to hire. Like at one point, the leads of the team couldn't actually decide who to hire. It was the contractors would just hire whoever they wanted. It was very like, what? Yeah, that's how they did it. But I think they should have all the things. I don't ever think they should build tools from scratch. I think you should invest in companies who do that. But I do think you need to take the time to build. I'm a believer that AI isn't there to replace specialized people, but it is there to augment their capabilities. But you still need a threshold of knowledge and capability in order for it to support you. Really low level stuff, yeah, it's going to replace you. It's just like the machines at McDonald's where you put in your own damn order. Yeah, I'd rather do that. At least my order is going to be right. If you can automate these tier one tasks, sure, get rid of the analysts. Build a training program where now you're building them up to be intermediate analysts, and their quality is going to be higher because they're still going to have to confirm AI. AI is not perfect. It's not a panacea for all the world's cybersecurity problems. I was about to say it sucks. It doesn't suck. But there are problems. There's a lot of miscategorizations and stuff. I've seen where it'll go through and retroactively change the host or whoever was indicated in the alerts like a day later. It's like, great, I'm glad you did that, but you have me going on investigating another host for no damn reason because you miscategorized it early on. But anyways, I guess to bring this one home, use AI, use good tools, actually tool your specialist properly. And it's not a single place. Everywhere I've been, their analysts are working with duct tape and bubble gum. Everywhere I have been.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Skill can overcome a lot of obstacles, 100%. But when you're not hiring the skill, you're not able to overcome the obstacles. I mean, that's been my job in a lot of places. We were talking about that on the podcast, the hire a wizard. Yes, I've been a wizard. I've fixed a lot of problems. But it's hard when there's a lot of problems and only one or two people solving all the problems. It becomes insurmountable. Tools, people, training programs, good hiring practices, all these things need to be nicely aligned and, be a leader. Actually come up with a strategy here. What are you going to compete on? How are you going to solve the problem? Understand your problem and go forth and conquer. Boom. Put that shit in a short.
Love it.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on AI and people, AJ?
So I agree that you probably need both. I think it will make it more difficult, or maybe not more difficult. It will require more people to invest in themselves in order to be above the threshold where AI can replace them, or
Good point.
that
Yes,
they're
very
forced
good.
to work at lower tiered organizations in order to get that experience. That's what I think will happen. Also, ranking in the creative arts, it was not supposed to replace us. That was not what was thought. And then now you
Too
can
bad.
make like a whole movie out of like artificial intelligence, or a podcast if your name is David Levezzo, because you're an asshole. But besides that,
You should snip that and send it to him.
it should be an enabler. I do think as time progresses and as we get more and more capabilities, that it could be possible to have two senior analysts, if you will, and basically no junior analysts. If you have the correct workflows, you have like there's a tech debt, right? Like upfront that you need to pay in order to get to that point. But I think
Buzzword.
once you reach that point, I do think it would be possible. It is what it is, man. We've both tried. We've both trained. I'm taking AI 100% of the time if it's that or 10 junior analysts. And to be clear, it's not always the junior people. We have been in projects and different things, training environments, etc., with senior people who have worse analysis skills than junior people, probably because the juniors are still more curious. They're actually invested in what is going on, aka they still give a shit. Whereas the more senior analysts might not care. Maybe they have conflicting priorities. Maybe their boss just doesn't empower them in order to like kind of shift stuff off to other analysts. I don't know. But we've seen senior, quote unquote, senior analysts who could also be replaced by AI.
Well, I didn't even tell my story about the senior person that we had hired, but to your point, I was going to add to it and I don't remember. I was going to say, I went to a conference where it was some real estate, like massive real estate company had a SOC, and they were talking about how SOAR was able to, so an orchestration tool. What's the security orchestration tool? Is that what it's
Security
called?
orchestration automation. Security orchestration automation response.
Boom. There you go. Good job. You didn't even Google that, did you?
No, man, I know it. I'll tell
Dang,
you
he's
why
better
I
than
know
me.
it after this. Tell your story.
Sispy.
No.
CISP. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, what they were saying basically is they get something like 8 or 9 thousand alerts a day, but their SOC only has 2 people. So they have a lot of what you would call like lows or notables or like more frequent alerts that are less fidelity, but you could use them to cross correlate, meaning like you could tie multiple lower severity alerts together and I'm like, oh, it's more severe. Like if we see a who am I and then Mimikatz and then all these, oh yeah, yep, someone's hacking some shit. But anyways, they only had a couple of analysts working because the orchestration tool was able to bring everything together into single alerts and just do a lot of this BS that a lot of analysts are dealing with. And they have a lot more high fidelity stuff. And now they're only working maybe like 10 alerts a day between the two of them, which is very feasible. But they've automated a lot of this crap that an analyst would normally do in a low, I was going to say low sophisticated, but yeah, SOC that hasn't been developed, a lower mature SOC. But the point is, like, the capabilities have been around for a while to replace a lot of these entry level analysts, and people just keep bringing them in because it makes business sense to them because they can hire one for maybe a 2/3 the price of an intermediate and maybe half the cost of a senior analyst or whatever it is. It's part of their strategy, I guess. But yeah. And then like we see a lot of people on social media now complain, oh, it's so hard, it's impossible to break into cybersecurity. Yeah, probably if you don't give a shit. All these other people are like putting in hours on Hack the Box and Try Hack Me and getting certifications. You need to stack that resume up to get an entry level job. They're few and far between. Like we're talking about how many junior analysts are pulled into SOCs, but there aren't a lot of companies hiring junior people for SOC analyst roles or junior cybersecurity roles in general. So you need to be competitive. You need to build that resume up in order to be competitive. Now, if you add to that you don't want to move anywhere, you only want remote, hell, you better be a damn all-star, and your resume better reflect that because the chances of you getting a job, slim to frickin' none. So, like when I broke into cybersecurity, I was literally moving location just to get the job because it was that important to me. Now, most people can't do that, especially if you have a family, but that's just part of you. You're a leader of your own family in your life. Figure out what makes sense for you. But if you can't move, like in Charleston, an analyst is making like entry-level analyst making 40 grand. Easy. And I started at about probably 50% higher than that. It sucks. If you're stuck in your location, you're stuck with whatever that market's willing to pay you. Not only that, now you need to compete with whatever that level of experience or that skill level cap is. You need to get up to whatever that is to compete. Because like Charleston too, sure, the salary's low, but we're also churning out cybersecurity, I was going to say specialists, but cybersecurity students from all over the place. We got all these local colleges, technical colleges. We got College of Charleston, Charleston Southern, the Citadel, all these places here churning out people who could be candidates and probably only 100 or so jobs maybe total. There's not a ton. There aren't a lot of people hiring cybersecurity people. Not to mention entry level cybersecurity people. So you better be ready to fight.
Yeah.
With AI and all this other stuff, better be ready to throw down.
Plus, there's several postings that aren't real jobs or may have already been filled. The companies just don't remove anymore. So that's always fun.
Or 10 listings for the same damn job, just different location.
Yeah.
I was going to tell you one last story, unless you had something else to say on that topic.
Yeah, I do. So the
Go.
reason why I know SOAR, when I was still in the AppCert, we toured a large financial institution, which is down in San Antonio, USAA. So very veteran friendly. They have a program where they actually hire, like, I think it was Marine, Navy, and Air Force. I don't think we took Army. And they would basically wear civvies or normal clothes, not uniform. And they would go to USAA, and they would work for 6 months. So like that was like where they quote unquote reported, and they got, corporate experience throughout the time. So super cool. We had a guy, my supervisor actually got that from the Air Force, and we were able to tour their facilities and stuff. And they actually showed us they had a SOAR platform, and this is back in 2016, 2017. So definitely not new. Like you said, technology's been around for a while. Can't remember what it was. It was, I think it was like Phantom back in the day. It got
Yeah, that's
bought by
one.
Splunk, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But what was really cool and why it kind of stuck with me, besides like the amount of alerting, is when you think about it from a time saved perspective, they had saved like several years worth of time based
Yeah.
over the amount of time that they no longer had to spend on these lower level alerts. So that could be a full-time salary that you could then allocate to another person. Maybe that's a new project that you're able to pursue. There's several different things that you can basically shift those resources from being needed in that area to another area that could help grow and expand your revenue.
I mean, there's a lot of cool things you can do with smart people. And so if you're hiring good people, you can reallocate their skill sets very easily into something that they'll enjoy versus, first of all, I promise you, no one enjoys working the same freaking alerts every day that are false positives, and it happens everywhere. No, people don't
True.
enjoy that. I promise. I've been there. I've done that. Fix that shit. Fix it. Get rid of it. No one's going to hate you for getting rid of this crap and automating it, except maybe like super, super junior people, I guess, who could have had a job, but now they're getting a more fun job because they don't have to do that anymore. Because it burns out. People used to leave SOCs after 3 to 4 months because it was so boring and so like fast paced. Hey, why aren't you closing? I have a buddy who works in a SOC now, and that's what he says. Like, they're on them. You look, your numbers are bad. You've only done like, I don't know, 20 today. These other guys are doing 80. Where are you at? And it's like, what? And he was telling me they were getting on him for a while, and they started leaving him alone. He was one of the guys I trained. And he doesn't do them because he does good quality, and he usually only picks up ones that are like, it could be something. And then he digs into them, spends time, and he leads investigations when there are stuff. So he's focused on the important stuff, which is where you want him.
Right.
He's good. That's where you want to put my boy. You don't want him sitting there closing, making red lights go green. Get him out of that shit.
Yeah.
But leaders, there's those bad metrics. We could probably talk about that on another podcast too. Metrics, they're not all made the same. If your metric that you're grading analysts by is how many are they closing out a shift, you're doing it wrong. Promise. But I will say it is very hard to figure out a metric. I don't know. I haven't gotten it right. I also haven't put a ton of thought into it, but it's hard. You have to measure a bunch of places. Quality is another big one you have to be concerned about that a lot of people neglect. But then you have to put someone full time on doing quality analysis. Are they doing this? Are they actually looking into it? Did they come up with a proper conclusion? Have someone checking behind all these people. Yeah, sure, leaders should be doing that too. But then you got to have the training, the support, and there's a whole structure. Again, make a plan. Poke holes, pen test, red team, your strategy for your team in cybersecurity, and then build stuff to overcome whatever the hell that is. But people just go YOLO, man, and it falls apart and they wonder why.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last story, and then we can wrap it up. All right, last story on hiring a senior person. Boom. Not a junior person, senior person, and they sucked.
Oh.
Yeah, so when I worked at an unnamed organization, we hired a person that was supposed to be, what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. It's supposed to be like I was. So I was a senior person at the time. So it was supposed to complement my capabilities. It's like, oh, cool, a friend. They used to say, oh, this is one of your friends when we just go dive down rabbit holes and solve problems. That's what they used to call them, smalls as friends. And so there's a few of us, and we all worked in different teams, and we would get together if there was a big problem, and we'd figure it out. We came up with some really cool stuff when we worked together. Anyway, so this guy was supposed to be one of those people. He came in as a forensic expert, is what he was supposed to be. And so one day I was tasked with developing interview questions, forensic interview questions. And I was like, perfect. What better guy to answer these questions than our forensic expert that we just hired? Mofo couldn't answer any of the frickin' questions. And these were entry-level questions. I was like kind of like medium, working up to senior on forensic capability. Tactical forensics is what I would say. Don't expect me to sit there for months like digging through dead disc forensics. But if you need something while an investigation is ongoing, I got you. I will find some shit. That's where I lived. But yeah, basic stuff. Guy couldn't answer any of it. Nothing. Zero. And he was supposed to be our forensic expert on the team. But turns out he was a very bad hire because he just did really poor analysis skills as well. They tried to have him just help with doing normal SOC work. Didn't really work out. He was very poor at that. He ended up moving over and almost taking like a purple teamish role. And people were telling me he couldn't even like figure out how to get the IP address of the host he was on.
Nice.
I'm like, well, and to be fair, right, you have to choose the right role. Like the guy had some good ideas, and we used to have some good philosophical conversations on our approach to cybersecurity. Like he was good to have at a leadership-ish level where he's coming up with plans. A good idea fairy is what we called him in the military. But he wasn't executing. He couldn't execute shit. But he had some good ideas, and he needed to be in a capacity where he could maybe project manage and build these out into a program of some sorts, perhaps. He should never have been in a technical role, period. That, I think, had to do with they had the wrong people interviewing. They didn't have any forensic people on the interview board. And so he was just one of those, because he was that type, he was really good at talking cybersecurity, right? If you talk to him like, oh, this guy knows a lot because he knows the buzzwords, he knows the lingo, he's been in it for a while. But if you sit him in front of a keyboard, he's going to fail. He can talk the talk, but he can't walk the walk in the technical realm.
Right.
So there you go. There's a bad hire because the wrong questions were asked, and he would never have been hired for that role if they had asked the right questions. But I'm sure, I don't know what he's doing now, but I'm sure if they put him in a leadership role somewhere, he'd probably be fine.
And to be clear, forensics, very technical field.
Yeah. AJ gets pissed off with my shit sometimes. Like, that's stupid. Don't do that here. I can find that here.
Yeah, I mean, I would fail a forensics interview for sure.
Forensics is fun. I enjoy it.
But
But not the month-long journeys into a dark hole, into a depressing abyss.
yeah, now you just live there full time, and it's way better.
All right, so I think we zigged and zagged on the hiring people, which is good. We actually turned this into a full podcast. I didn't know if we were going to get it up to normal time frame, so we'll probably just be doing the 1 to 9. I know we're at your bedtime anyways.
Yep.
So you want to wrap it up? Any kind of like last minute things, and I'll do my, I'll say kind of in summary for me. What's your in summary here?
I think the biggest thing, and I feel like this is kind of a cop out, but I think the biggest thing is hiring someone who not only knows what they're doing, but who you trust to take care of your employees. And because I think that's a big thing that, for instance, I will just flat out say I did not get from my last boss. So like,
shout out.
I mean, it's fine. It's documented. But like my relationship with the boss I had before that person, making memes, just so we had that camaraderie. Previous boss, just really no communication, whether it's work related or otherwise. Current boss, I can text. Director, I can text. It's very different dynamics. And I think that is one thing that will help increase output from your individuals, is having some type of rapport, knowing how those people like to be presented information. How do they like to present information? Like, again, I'm very direct. I also like people to be direct. I don't want to spin in circles to try to figure out what you say. I know, Mike, sometimes I don't communicate very well. So you have to ask me, like, what the hell are you actually saying?
Yeah.
So
you speak a foreign language sometimes.
Yeah. And it's my brain. Like, to me, it makes sense. But I think knowing those things and having a basic understanding of who you are trusting to lead your people. And basically, my philosophy has always been when I'm managing people is I work for them, and I think that isn't always how people view it. And what I mean by that, like even though I didn't manage you, right? Like I would try to take all the dumbass meetings that the team had, so you didn't have to do it because you are.
Will recommend 100%.
So you could build code and do other things that you excel at that I know you're better at than I am, right? Even with like the new hires and stuff like that, I think it's important to be upfront, but maybe not tell them everything, like, which is where I get in trouble because I'm very open. But yeah, know at least something about your people, how they like to be presented, how they like to present, what drives them, what their motivations are, and you'll be off to a great start. You're up. You gonna follow up or just sit there?
Just stare at you. Miss the good old days. No, so like I guess my takeaway for this, wrap it up, having a strategy for your program ahead of time, like begin with the end in mind. I read that in a book somewhere and I kind of live that way. I backwards plan, and that's a big term for military people too. Yeah, so backwards planning is a big thing you learn in the military, right? What's your objective? How do we work ourselves to that objective? And the same goes for cybersecurity programs, whatever you have. What is your objective? Right? And that comes down to how much money do you have? What type of organization are you in? What's the structure of that organization? What are the other resources you may have? How many headcount do you have? And work backwards. Okay, I get 20 people. All right, this is our goal. This is what we have to protect. All right, I should probably allocate these to this and these to this, and plan that backwards, and then make sure you include budgets for everything you need, such as training and dwell time to get people spun up for whatever the task is. But have a strategy. Outline the strategy before you start throwing money at the problem. I've been to so many organizations where they have crazy amounts of money, but it just doesn't solve the problem because they're not getting to the root cause of the problem, which is high turnover, unhappy people, workflows are jacked up, whatever. They just didn't have a strategy. It's not working out. So strategy is my big takeaway. Have a plan and then dive into whatever you're doing, and then start working on what AJ said, making sure you're putting the right people in place for your leaders, making sure they have the right tools and resources. Make sure you're choosing the right people, right? Your whole HR process, your recruiting piece is good, where you're asking the right questions, you're choosing the right people, and all those things. And then you can have a really good program, I think. Yeah, that's it. So is that a wrap? Are we done? You're muted. You're there about the hawk a loogie.
No loogie.
Yeah, so that's it for this episode. Check us out, social media. Where are we at in social media? You're a social media man.
We got the LinkedIns. We got the TikTokies. We got YouTube. I think that's it.
Yeah, follow us. Both of us are on LinkedIn as well. Reach out if you have any questions. Yeah, so that's it. Check out this. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we'll see you next time here on C-Suite Cyber.